All right, welcome to another deep dive. Buckle up, because today we're going deep into the story of Joseph.
You know, one of the most compelling figures in the book of Genesis.
Definitely. But we're zooming in on just one chapter, Genesis chapter 39. You might think, one chapter, how much can there really be to talk about?
Oh, trust me, this chapter is packed.
It's a wild ride. Betrayal, resilience, and some seriously unexpected twists and turns, all in just a few verses.
It's amazing how much is packed into this one chapter. We meet Joseph mid-journey. He's already been through so much, sold into slavery by his own brothers, and taken to Egypt.
Talk about a rough start. But this is where things get interesting. Joseph is bought by this wealthy Egyptian official, Potiphar, and suddenly, things seem to change for him.
It's more than just luck, though. The text really emphasizes this idea that the Lord was with Joseph. This phrase appears again and again throughout the chapter. It's suggesting that Joseph's success, it's not just about his own abilities.
Right. There's this divine force at play, and you can't miss it. The text really drives home Joseph's success. We hear how he prospered, how Potiphar's entire household was blessed because of him. It's like everything Joseph touches turns to gold.
Exactly. And ultimately, he's even made overseer of Potiphar's entire estate. This isn't just, being a good worker. This speaks to something much deeper, this inherent leadership quality that just shines through even in a foreign land, even as a slave.
It really makes you think how many people could not only survive, but thrive and lead in such a challenging situation. It's remarkable.
It really is.
But hold on, because here comes the plot twist.
Yeah.
Enter Potiphar's wife, who, as we're told, takes quite a liking to Joseph.
Right. Remember, Joseph is described as well-favored, in other words, good-looking.
Good-looking, yeah. And Potiphar's wife, she doesn't just admire him from afar. She actively, shall we say, pursues him. And this is where things get a little, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Potiphar's wife repeatedly propositions Joseph. Talk about an incredibly difficult position to be in. He's a slave in this man's house, totally dependent on his goodwill, and now he's being pursued by his wife. How do you even navigate a situation like that?
It's a situation fraught with danger, but Joseph refuses her advances. And what's really interesting here is his reasoning. He doesn't just say, no, I can't. He says, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?
So it's not just about respecting his master. It's something much deeper. It's this moral code rooted in his faith.
Right.
His integrity is tied to something bigger than the immediate situation. It makes you think about what principles really guide our own actions when the stakes are high.
It does. And the text really emphasizes this point. She tempted him day by day.
Day after day. This woman was relentless.
She was.
It really is a testament to Joseph's willpower and his faith that he resisted, especially considering what happens next.
Because, of course, this story doesn't have a simple happy ending. Potiphar's wife, rejected and furious, she decides to take revenge.
And this is where we really see the darker side of power dynamics.
Yeah.
She accuses Joseph of assaulting her. A complete lie, of course. And she uses her position to completely control the narrative.
And it's chilling how the text even mentions that she kept Joseph's garment as evidence.
Oh, wow.
In that society, a woman's word, especially against a slave, held immense weight.
Yeah.
It was a system that easily allowed for this kind of manipulation.
It's a really stark reminder of how quickly things can shift, how easily someone can become a victim of circumstance, even when they've done nothing wrong.
And sadly, Potiphar believes his wife without question. Doesn't even give Joseph a chance to defend himself.
So, based solely on this false accusation, Joseph is thrown into prison. You can't help but feel for him at this point. He's done everything right, acted with integrity, and yet...
It seems like it's all falling apart.
Yeah.
But even in this moment of utter despair, the narrator reminds us, the Lord was with Joseph.
There's that phrase again. It's almost haunting. What does it actually mean that the Lord was with Joseph? How did that manifest in such a dire situation? It almost feels like in prison, those words, the Lord was with Joseph, they take on a whole new meaning. Here he is, falsely imprisoned. Yeah. And yet we're still told that God's presence is there with him.
It really challenges our assumptions about what it means to have, divine favor. You'd think if God was with you, you wouldn't face this kind of hardship. But Joseph's story, well, it suggests something much more complex.
Totally. It's not about avoiding difficulty. It's about finding that strength and purpose, even in the midst of those difficulties.
So how does that play out in prison? I mean, does Joseph just sit there and wait for a miracle?
Well, not exactly. In prison, he encounters two key figures,
Okay.
Pharaoh's cupbearer and the baker.
Oh, right, right.
And they both have these troubling dreams.
Yeah.
And Joseph, with, that divine insight that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
he's able to interpret them. This is where things get really interesting. It's like this whole episode in prison becomes a training ground for Joseph's future.
Absolutely. It's here that this gift for dream interpretation, a gift that we know will eventually catapult him to power, it first becomes apparent.
So let's talk about these dreams. What did the cupbearer and baker dream about? And what did Joseph's interpretations reveal?
So the cupbearer, he dreams about this vine with 3 branches.
Okay.
He sees it bud, blossom, and produce grapes. And then he takes those grapes and he squeezes them into Pharaoh's cup.
That sounds almost idyllic, at least for a dream. Did Joseph see it as a positive omen?
He did. His interpretation was very straightforward. He said the 3 branches, they represent 3 days, and within 3 days, the cupbearer would be restored to his position, serving Pharaoh.
So, good news for the cupbearer. What about the baker? I have a feeling his dream wasn't quite as cheerful.
Yeah, you're right. The baker, he dreamt of carrying 3 baskets of bread on his head, but birds were eating from the top basket.
Yeah. That imagery is a little unsettling. What did Joseph make of that one?
Well, unfortunately for the baker, Joseph's interpretation was much more ominous. He said the 3 baskets, they also represented 3 days. But in this case, within those 3 days, Pharaoh would lift up his head and hang him.
Oh, wow. What a contrast. One man gets his job back, the other, well, not so lucky. It really highlights this power of Joseph's gift.
Right.
His ability to discern meaning, to even predict the future. Makes you wonder about the nature of dreams in the ancient world. Were they seen as just these psychological phenomena, or did they hold a deeper, more spiritual significance?
That's a great question. And I think the text actually offers some clues. Joseph, in his interpretations, repeatedly states, "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace."
Right.
He's not taking credit for these interpretations.
It's not about him.
Right. He's attributing them to a higher power.
So he's acting as a conduit, a messenger. It goes back to that idea of the Lord was with him. Even in his interpretations, he's not relying on himself, but acknowledging that divine source.
Right.
So we have these 2 contrasting interpretations, one hopeful, one tragic.
Right.
What happens next? Does it all play out as Joseph predicted?
It does. Just as Joseph foretold, the cupbearer is restored to his position, and the baker meets a tragic end. And this, of course, validates Joseph's gift, solidifies the idea that he's operating under divine guidance.
But there's a twist, right? There wouldn't be a good story without a twist.
Yeah, you're right. And it's a real heartbreaker. Joseph, in his hopefulness, asks the cupbearer to remember him, to mention him to Pharaoh. He's hoping to gain his freedom. I mean, he did just help this man avoid a terrible fate.
Seems like a pretty reasonable request. You'd think the cupbearer would be, overflowing with gratitude, eager to repay Joseph's kindness.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But here's the twist. The cupbearer, he forgets about Joseph. He goes back to his comfortable life in Pharaoh's palace. Doesn't give him a second thought.
Oh no. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah.
It's almost worse than if the baker had been the one to regain his freedom.
Yeah.
You can't help but feel for Joseph in that moment. Betrayed, forgotten, his hope just dashed.
It's a crushing blow. It really is. And it leaves us with this sense of, injustice.
Yeah.
Wondering if Joseph's faith, his integrity, will ultimately be rewarded.
It feels like a test.
Right.
Maybe this is where that divine favor is really being tested.
Yeah.
Not just in Joseph's ability to endure hardship, but in his ability to maintain hope, even when all seems lost. Welcome back to our deep dive into Genesis chapter 39. We're really in the thick of it now. It's a story full of these unexpected turns.
It really is.
And we left off with Joseph seemingly in prison. After helping the cupbearer, no less.
Yeah.
It's a tough spot to be in, to be betrayed by the very person you helped.
Right.
It makes you wonder how anyone could hold on to their faith in that situation.
It's certainly a test of faith. But as we'll see, this apparent setback, it's actually a crucial part of a much larger plan. And this is where the concept of divine providence, it really takes center stage. Remember that phrase we keep coming back to? The Lord was with Joseph. Well, it turns out that even when it seems like God is silent, he's still working behind the scenes. He's orchestrating these events.
So Joseph is, languishing in prison, forgotten, seemingly out of options. What happens to change his fate? How does he go from prisoner to, this position of power?
Well, it all starts with Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh begins having these very disturbing dreams, and none of his advisors can interpret them. These dreams are so vivid, so unsettling, they really shake Pharaoh to his core.
I can imagine. I mean, it's so fascinating how dreams played such a significant role in the ancient world.
Right.
They weren't just dismissed as random thoughts. They were seen as messages, omens, sometimes even prophecies.
Exactly. And in Pharaoh's case, these dreams, they were clearly weighing very heavily on him.
Yeah.
He was desperate for answers. He needed someone to make sense of these strange images that were haunting him.
And this is where the cupbearer finally remembers Joseph, right?
Yes.
Talk about delayed gratitude.
After 2 years of silence, the cupbearer, prompted by Pharaoh's, desperation, he finally remembers Joseph and that remarkable ability to interpret dreams.
2 years. It makes you wonder, did Joseph start to lose hope during that time? I mean, to be forgotten, to have your, one chance at freedom just slip away.
Yeah.
It'd be so easy to just give in to despair.
It would be understandable. But the text really emphasizes this point that even in those moments of silence, God was still at work. Sometimes those periods of waiting, those times when it seems like nothing is happening, they're actually the most crucial for our development.
So the cupbearer tells Pharaoh about Joseph.
Right.
What's Pharaoh's reaction? Is he skeptical, or is he at this point willing to try anything?
Well, he's clearly desperate for answers. I mean, he summons Joseph from prison immediately, and he recounts these troubling dreams. In one dream, he sees 7 healthy cows, and they're devoured by 7 sickly cows. And in another dream, he sees 7 good ears of grain, just swallowed up by 7 thin, blighted ears.
Those are some powerful images, full of symbolism and foreboding.
Right.
These aren't just, random abstract dreams. They seem to point towards something much more specific, like a message about the fate of Egypt itself.
Exactly. And none of Pharaoh's advisors can offer a satisfactory explanation. They're stumped.
Of course.
But Joseph, empowered by God, steps forward with this bold, clear interpretation.
Okay, so what does Joseph say? I mean, what do these strange dreams mean?
Well, Joseph tells Pharaoh that the dreams are a warning. The 7 healthy cows and the good ears of grain represent 7 years of abundance, prosperity for Egypt.
Okay.
But those 7 years are going to be followed by 7 years of severe famine.
Oh, wow.
Symbolized by the sickly cows and the blighted ears.
Right.
And this famine is going to be so devastating that it's going to consume all the surplus from those good years.
That's not just an interpretation. It's a prophecy. It's like a glimpse into the future of Egypt.
It really is. And what's even more remarkable is that Joseph, he doesn't just deliver this prophecy of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
He also offers a solution.
Oh.
He advises Pharaoh to appoint, a wise and discerning leader to oversee the collection and storage of grain during those good years.
More.
To ensure that Egypt will have enough to survive the famine.
So he's not just a dreamer, he's a strategist. He sees the problem and he immediately jumps into action.
Precisely. This is where, Joseph's true brilliance shines through. He combines that divine insight with practical wisdom. He's not just interpreting dreams, he's offering real leadership in a time of crisis.
So what's Pharaoh's reaction? Does he buy into Joseph's interpretation and his plan?
Oh, Pharaoh is totally convinced. He recognizes Joseph's wisdom, and in a truly remarkable turn of events, he appoints him, this former slave, as the second most powerful man in all of Egypt.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a stunning elevation. It's a testament to Joseph's character, his ability to really tap into something larger than himself.
It's a story of resilience, of faith rewarded. It shows how even the most challenging situations, they can lead to these unexpected breakthroughs. But it also leaves us with some questions, doesn't it?
It does.
What does it truly mean to have the Lord be with us? How can we cultivate that same kind of faith and resilience in our own lives? And when we're faced with setbacks and betrayals, how do we maintain hope that a brighter future is possible?
These are really important questions. And perhaps Joseph's story offers some clues. His unwavering faith, his integrity, his ability to see opportunity, even in the darkest circumstances, these are qualities that I think we can all aspire to in our own journeys.
As we wrap up our look at chapter 39, we're left with this sense that it's just the beginning of Joseph's story, but it's also a story that really speaks to something universal, something that resonates across cultures and time. It's a story about a power of faith, the importance of resilience, and that potential for transformation that exists within each of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the captivating world of Joseph.